Welcome to another episode of the Jampack Report, today for December the 22nd of 2020. Of course, this is a daily gaming news podcast meant to bring you everything you need to know from around the industry. So if you enjoy the show and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and get your daily fix. But we are currently in the midst of the next generation of consoles. The PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, and the S, they're all out in the wild, and if you're lucky enough, you could get the chance to snag one. However, if that doesn't seem to be in the cards right now, there are going to be plenty on the way in the year ahead. But what else is on the way? Plenty of good games built from the ground up for this next generation hardware, and one of those games is Gran Turismo 7, and some new comments have me very optimistic about this new racing entry. Gran Turismo boss Kazunori Yamauchi has claimed his team will make no concessions in terms of attention to detail as the developer looks to wrap up Gran Turismo 7 for PlayStation 5. Speaking at the FIA Gran Turismo Championships 2020, the Polyphony CEO briefly spoke about the future of the iconic PlayStation racer and emphasized that, quote, applying an incredible amount of attention to fine details was Polyphony's production style. We always pursue the best at Polyphony Digital, he said. We don't want to make concessions on anything. We want to deliver the best to everyone. And this is no longer just my thinking, but it's the mindset of all 200 or so staff at our company. They say in Japan that divinity comes to reside in the details, and it's so true. How much attention you pay to the fine details, how to perfect it, hone it to perfection, and applying an incredible amount of attention to this is our production style. Gran Turismo 7 is officially due to arrive on PlayStation 5 sometime in 2021. A Sony marketing video briefly mentioned a first half 2021 release for Gran Turismo 7, however this was recently changed to simply 2021. Considering Polyphony Digital's reputation for pro-traced development cycles, it would not be surprising if the PlayStation 5 installment required extra development time, especially considering the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and PlayStation 5's already packed 2021 release schedule. The new God of War is also expected to release next year, as well as console exclusives Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, Kena Bridge of Spirits, Horizon Forbidden West, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Simon Rutter, PlayStation's EVP for Europe, previously claimed that Polyphony's first racing installment since 2017's Gran Turismo Sport will benefit from almost every single technological enhancement included in Sony's next-gen console. The loading times will be next to nothing compared to what they have been in the past, he told The Guardian earlier this year. Sitting in the cockpit, the 3D audio allows you to hear the thunderous roar of a Ferrari behind you or in front of you, and you can recognize the difference between that and the engine noise of a Maserati. Driving the car using the DualSense controller, you'll have a different feeling in your hands from the smooth, undulating tarmac of a racetrack compared to the gritty sensation on a gravel track, Rutter claimed. Pressing a soft accelerator will feel very different than pressing on a stiff brake pedal or a gear paddle. Polyphony CEO Kazunori Yamauchi has previously suggested the studio will prioritize increased frame rates over higher display resolutions for Gran Turismo 7, and he also said the next Gran Turismo will incorporate the past, present, and future of the series. Very interested in this one. Now, in my own personal preference when it comes to racing genres, or I should just say racing genre games, I'm much more into the arcade approach. I'm more of a MotorStorm player than I am a Gran Turismo player. And man, I wish they would bring back MotorStorm, because I missed that game so much. And Dirt 5 is the closest thing that I'm going to be getting to that anytime soon. But I digress. When it comes to Gran Turismo 7, it is one of the most realistic racing simulators on the market at the consumer level. Of course, you can go much higher whenever you get games that have these cockpit functionalities, the PC games that are ultra realistic. You can find simulators that feel much more real than Gran Turismo 7, but when it comes to the console experience and when it comes to what people can expect on next-gen hardware, Gran Turismo 7 is second to none, and it's pretty much going to be going head-to-head with Forza Motorsport on the Xbox side of the house. So I'm looking forward to seeing this game, and I think there are several things to note here. First and foremost, this game is not coming out on the PlayStation 4. It is a PlayStation 5 title. Now, of course, that could shift, that could change, but I feel like that would have been announced by now. This is a PlayStation 5 game, and this will be able to take full advantage of what the PlayStation 5 has to offer in terms of graphical fidelity, in terms of frame rates. There will be no concessions holding back the game just to make it play on last-gen hardware. that is a fantastic move, because while it is nice to have cross-generational titles, the nature of the beast is that eventually these consoles, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, just won't cut it anymore when it comes to what developers want to do with their games and what they can do with their games. And so eventually the shift will happen. Will it happen in the first year completely? Probably not, but there are a few games here and there that are becoming exclusives. You see this happening with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. That is also a next-gen exclusive. On top of that, the development of this game has been very, very, very diligently handled, because you see no delays because they haven't announced a date. That is how you do it, because I guarantee you this game could have been a launch game if things had not gone south with COVID-19, potentially other issues that might have gotten in the mix, but there were no promises made. So now, whenever the game is ready, they can say August 2021, or if it's not ready until November, they can drop the date in October. Whatever it might be, you are able to just turn and pivot whenever you need to, because the game will be ready when it's ready. Even if it gets delayed into 2022, we wouldn't even really know how far of a difference that was between the actual release date, because we don't know. You see what I'm saying? The value of secrecy in the gaming industry? Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Gran Turismo 7 has to offer. Now, this is not a console seller for me, because again, I like the more arcade approach to racing games, but this is absolutely one that is going to be getting a lot of people in the door, because Gran Turismo is one of those legendary racing titles. And for a lot of people, since the PlayStation 1, Gran Turismo has been one of their favorites. So it's exciting to see a new one on the way, and more details about just how good it will be. Now, moving on to the Nintendo side of news, Nintendo Switch is halfway through its life cycle, according to Nintendo boss, of course, Nintendo of America president Doug Bowser. In a new interview with Polygon, Bowser stated that, quote, "We believe we are just at the midpoint of this life cycle on the Nintendo Switch platform," when asked about the likelihood of an upgraded Switch model coming to retail. Bowser also finally gave a definitive answer on the long-rumored Switch Pro hardware upgrade that has apparently been in the works at Nintendo for the last few years. It is not something Nintendo is focusing on in the immediate future. Quote, "The momentum on Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch Lite in the fourth year is strong," Bowser explains, "and we believe we are changing the trajectory of another typical console lifecycle. And we will continue for the foreseeable future to really lean into both of those platforms and the content that comes with it, because it's the symbiotic relationship that makes the real difference, and it's why Nintendo Switch is so differentiated," end quote. To put it simply, Bowser believes that Nintendo Switch family of consoles is still going strong, and there is no immediate reason to replace the hardware with another model whilst it still holds such a strong position on the market. The console even outsold the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S in the US during the next-gen console's launch months after all, and I've said before that's probably due to the supply constraints. But regardless, Bowser's comments do somewhat contradict a recent Bloomberg report that suggested Nintendo had asked devs to make their games 4K ready for an upcoming Switch hardware refresh, but if the president of Nintendo of America says the company is not interested in a hardware refresh for the foreseeable future, he's probably not lying. As of September 2020, Nintendo Switch has sold 68.3 million units around the world. I agree with him, quite frankly. Now, does that not mean the value resides in a Switch Pro? Does that not mean that the consumer might want that? Not necessarily. I think that the Switch Pro definitely has a place on the market because, as I said last week, whenever this same kind of story came up, I would love to see a version of the Nintendo Switch that is a fully home console, a set-top box, if you will, so that it can really take full advantage of the power that that version of a console can have. You could put an extra GPU in there, you could do a lot of things with it to make sure that these games are running at their best, but at the same time, as I said last week, the Nintendo fans and those that buy a Nintendo Switch aren't looking for the most beautiful graphics. They aren't looking for the highest frame rates. They're looking for fun games, and they're looking for a piece of hardware to play them on. Nintendo is your one-stop shop for all of that. They really do make it easy. With Nintendo Switch being halfway through its life, it seems like you can expect more support for the base hardware going forward, and for good reason, because it is doing incredibly well. Now, one game that is coming to Nintendo Switch is Among Us, and it is reportedly the most popular game ever in terms of monthly players. Now, you might be saying, Sam, that's probably just somebody throwing around the phrase most popular game ever. No, actually, this is a research report from Nielsen ratings. That's kind of wild. But the Innersloth-made game, which encourages players to collaborate or deceive each other in an online murder mystery, had roughly 500 million monthly active users in November, according to Nielsen in its latest digital marketing report. However, while Among Us is incredibly popular, its revenue is comparatively modest. Since Among Us is not heavily monetized, earnings figures are comparatively smaller, Superdata said. The PC version, which has a $5 upfront price, accounted for the majority of revenue from August to November, despite having an extremely small share of the total player base. Among Us launched for free on iOS and Android devices in June 2018 before releasing for PC in November of the same year. However, the game's popularity did not take off until this summer when it was picked up by popular content creators on Twitch and YouTube. According to Sensor Tower data, the mobile version was downloaded some 42 million times between August 1st and September 14th, accounting for around 70% of its lifetime downloads. Twitch has played a significant role in the popularity of Among Us. In October, the game drew huge numbers to the platform when U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, you know this person, attracted Twitch's third most concurrent single-channel viewers ever. The politician, who was streaming to encourage young people to vote in the U.S. election, had created her Twitch channel just 24 hours earlier and quickly attracted hundreds of thousands of followers. The breakout success has inspired developer Innersloth to expand the game to multiple new platforms later this month. Last week, it released a Switch version of Among Us for $5 featuring cross-platform play and made the game available through the Epic Games Store and Xbox Game Pass for PC. Microsoft also confirmed last week that Among Us will be released for Xbox One and Series X and S consoles and Xbox Game Pass for console in 2021. Fortnite recently introduced a limited-time mode called The Spy Within, which is actually inspired by Among Us as well. This game just does not stop. And again, this headline, Among Us is reportedly the most popular game ever in terms of monthly players. That is wild. And again, it's that free element that does bring it in, and the way that it ties into the online content creation community, because so many people are watching the game on YouTube and Twitch and wanting to play. And it is also just a fun game to pick up and play with friends, especially in a time whenever we have this socially distanced kind of society. You jump on Discord or a phone call and you're able to play Among Us. But I'm going to echo what was said on the Kind of Funny Xcast earlier this week. The value of these next-gen versions, or even the current-gen versions, on the Xbox One and the Series X, and eventually the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4, these are going to have voice chat built into the hardware that they're running on. And the same goes for PC, of course. But when it comes to running on mobile, you can't really have that voice chat kind of experience. And so this is really the first time you are going to be able to see the game come into its own and really take off the way that it should because of that voice chat capability natively on the hardware. On Nintendo Switch, of course, you can't really do that right now unless you go through the app. It's kind of a pain. But on the Xbox and PlayStation platforms, eventually, yes, that is going to be a big boon. Now, to round out today's show, I wanted to touch on this story because it's something I saw on Twitter. God of War and Uncharted remakes were being explored by PlayStation. Personally, I think this is being read into a little bit too much, but I wanted to share it regardless. So, former PlayStation employee Michael Mumbauer talks about the idea of remakes of God of War and Uncharted during a recent little spot on Gabbin' and Games PlayStation Insider interview. Of course, you can find that. That is David Jaffe's new little show that he does. I say little show like it's not anything it's huge. You know, it is what it is. Sorry. Anyways, throughout the conversation, Mumbauer and Jaffe talked about the different aspects of his role while an employee at Sony San Diego Studios and how his job saw him overseeing a visual arts group that provided support to other Sony gaming studios, but eventually his role began to shift, which saw him move towards remakes and remasters. When asked by Jaffe if he could explain it in a little more detail, Mumbauer replied, "Remakes and remasters were things I was chasing after, so that's why the dev team was built. What I can tell you is that's what I was chasing because I believed that there was value in doing something like a remake of God of War at the visual fidelity of today, or a remake of Uncharted 1. Even though Mumbauer is no longer working at the studio, the team in question still exists, which is comprised of around 200 people in total and are currently working on an unannounced title." I want to talk about this quote. He says, "What I can tell you is that what I was chasing because, okay, so what he could tell us, that implies there is something that you cannot. So therefore, likely, you aren't going to be seeing a God of War remake or an Uncharted 1 remake, because if those existed, there's probably an NDA, even after you don't work there anymore. So this headline, while something that I would absolutely love to see brought into reality, I don't think is actually going to be happening. But that's just my take. Now, I would love to see what you think in the comment section down below, but it just seems like it's a little wishful thinking to think that during the success of God of War 2018, you're going to see a remake and a revisitation of the original God of War. But again, we will see. However, that is beside the point. That rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and if you did, drop me a like down below and let me know what stories caught your eye. But until tomorrow, you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon, and peace.